Good morning. So stick with me today because I'm going somewhere with all this. Last Tuesday, I talked to you about how even Seneca said so many years ago that everybody thinks we're living in the worst of times. And I said, Solomon says there's nothing new under the sun. Last Thursday, I talked to us about why that's a harmful thing for us to think is that we're living in the worst of times and how it divides us and so forth. Well, today is kind of a spin-off from those two videos, particularly the role, and I know I've talked about this before, the role that social media plays in keeping us disconnected and divided and so forth, which is ironically the opposite of the very thing that social media was created to do. If you can remember the beginnings of Facebook, we were all going to be connected and in touch all the time, right? And I also want to hopefully finish an article I've been talking about since May of 2022, an article from The Atlantic by Jonathan Haidt. I've used it so many times, but hopefully I'm going to exhaust its contents today. But it was called Why the Past 10 Years of American Life Have Been Uniquely Stupid. And like I said, I've referred to this article before, but he talks about in that article why social media has created factions among us. And there's two things in that article I wanted to highlight today. The first part that he says is that social scientists have identified at least three major forces that collectively bind together successful democracy. So there's three things, they say, that make a democracy successful. The first is social capital, meaning there's extensive social networks and people trust each other. The second is strong institutions, I'm assuming government organizations, churches, etc. And thirdly, shared stories, this idea that we're all here for the common cause and the common good. And he ends that paragraph by saying social media has weakened all three. Now, I'm not sure I agree that social media has weakened shared stories, because whatever odd thing that you find that you enjoy, you can find somebody to share that story with you. There's probably somebody out there that does that, and I would say social media has helped that. But anyway, it is likely, as we've talked about before, that social media highlights our differences, because that is what the logarithm is created for. It creates more views. Controversy and scandal and hateful, inflammatory speech are really what drives the viewers. And he suggests that in the article that in 2012, 2013, when the algorithms took over, it started driving us towards those things that are inflammatory to us. So essentially, to summarize his first point, what makes democracy strong is trustworthy people, trustworthy institutions, shared by people with a common interest. So we can evaluate that for what it is. That's not the key point today. So the question I want to ask is, why aren't our relationships stronger? And that's the second point he talks about in the article, that what has happened at social media is that as people became more comfortable sharing the intimate details of their lives with individuals and corporations, they became more adept at putting on performances and managing their personal brand. So maybe what I should be talking about today is hypocrisy versus reality, but I think he realizes that there's a good bit of performance-oriented social media out there. But he says they do activities that might impress others, but they do not deepen friendships in the way that a private phone conversation will. And we think we know that's true. And to paraphrase what he's saying, social media is performing, not connecting. Now, I realize the irony of me standing here on social media saying that to you, but I just have to say I'm not performing. I'm trying to help you to think today specifically. But I would say that the performing part is especially true when it's income generating. When people have social media as their source of income, and it is grown by more viewers, then the more likelihood they are to be more inflammatory, more divisive, whatever, to drive more views to their site. Hopefully you know this. I've said this before, that when views equal dollars, then inflammatory speech and whatever gains another viewer is the best tool. So where am I going with all this today? Why am I saying this? Well, Romans chapter 12, verse 2, this is what you've been waiting for. This is from the New Living Translation. Says this. You probably recognize Romans 12 reference. It says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. So I would challenge you with that today. Don't let social media be what forms your thinking, because it's created to entertain you, to divide you from other people, and to ultimately, when we started this whole thing, to corrupt democracy. Then he says in the rest of the verse, Paul says in Romans 12:2, then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Come back to that in a second. Ephesians 4:23 also says, be renewed in the spirit of your mind. So that's what I'm challenging today. As you go through social media, this thing, is this really what's going on here? Am I being entertained? Am I being drawn to the site? Am I being hateful towards someone else? So recognize what media itself and social media are doing and why they do it. You can't complain that you're not hearing from God if you're always hearing from social media. And so what I want to do, think about that as a challenge today. Next time, I want to come kind of a branch from this tree. Some people have said that their personal choices and the things that they do don't matter if it doesn't harm anyone else. I'm going to tell you why that just isn't true. And I've kind of fed that a little bit today, but you realize that strong trust and relationships are important for democracy and us all being in this together. So until next time, God bless. Go make the world a kinder, better place. A little less social media and a little more human interaction is probably a good idea, he said, signing off social media.